Game Boy Micro. Game Boy Micro. I love it so much. It's so dinky. But what makes it the best? Well, we'll get to that. But what is it? This is the last of the Game Boys. This hit the stores in November 2005, a full 8 months after what Wikipedia describes as its successor, the Nintendo DS. And already, you see the first problem. The second is that it only plays Game Boy Advance games. They took out the chips for backwards compatibility to make it extra dinky. It's dinky not because Nintendo was competing with other portable gaming consoles of the time, they owned that market already. This was to compete with the iPod. This is how Reggie Fils-Aimé described it when he unveiled it.
Now I know you haven't seen this. It's Game Boy Micro. Game Boy Micro, just a hair bigger and about 2/3 the weight of an iPod mini. It is not new technology, but it is a brand new look. A new look in the sense that it has the best and brightest screen we've ever put in a handheld. A new look in the sense that no matter how tight your jeans, it'll still fit in your pocket. And a new look in the fact that you can customize it in any way you want with a wide array of faceplates. When it comes to market, this fall, Micro represents yet another morphing of the Game Boy brand, this time to the image-conscious consumer.
It's a very mid-2000s product. Who never likes it? It's small enough to fit in your skinny jeans, and you could buy faceplates to customize it. In fact, let's watch a little bit more of that announcement.
It's not a successor to Game Boy Advance or Nintendo DS, but rather a further extension of portable play.
You hear that? Not a replacement for the Game Boy Advance or the Nintendo DS, but a further extension of portable play. They hedged a bit when they released the DS, you see. They didn't plan that the DS would replace the Game Boy Advance, but that they'd exist alongside one another in the market. Unfortunately, the DS turned out to be way more successful than they'd anticipated, possibly in part due to its backwards compatibility with Game Boy Advance games, which is a mad thing to put in your new system if you still want people buying GBAs. I think Nintendo expected the Game Boy Advance line would have a little more life in it than it did. They announced the Game Boy Micro to a world full of flip phones and iPods, and that's the market Nintendo wanted. At the time, the trend was towards smaller portable technology, unlike now, when it's all about getting a big screen as thin as you can get it. But I feel like they underestimated noughties teens. We didn't have flip phones and iPods just because they were fashionable, but because we wanted to text our friends and listen to music.
These devices weren't just popular because of the style, but because they were also the best at what they did from what was available at the time. Fitting in skinny jeans was important, true, but we weren't just buying any chic little device going with interchangeable faceplates regardless of its functionality. The Game Boy Micro was going toe-to-toe with the DS. Regardless of how Nintendo saw it, the public knew the DS as the successor to the Game Boy Advance line, and a device that could play all the old games and all the new games was obviously more compelling. All it lacked was a place in your skinny jeans, but that'll be rectified by the DS Lite 7 months later, and even in that interim period, pulling the hottest new gaming system out of your bag was still cooler than pulling last-gen tech out of your pocket. The Game Boy Micro came at a time when there was no nostalgia for GBA games. If you were playing GBA, you were into the latest games from Nintendo, and we all knew after the DS released, that's where the latest games were going to be.
It's also kind of weird now that this is the last Game Boy. Like, we all know what a Game Boy is. It's a big, chunky, dedicated handheld gaming system. But it's also this noughties fashion accessory with interchangeable faceplates. It didn't sell well at the time, but if you picked one up from a bargain bin in the mid-2000s and held on to it, well, you're laughing now. The Game Boy Micro, 2 decades later, is super desirable and super expensive. Why is that? One of the big drawbacks of this at the time was that it didn't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games. Well, this is the best device to chuck a flash cart into, because even without those Game Boy chips, the standard GBA hardware is perfectly capable of emulating a Game Boy Color, or a NES. I've got an EZ Flash Omega in mine, and one of the games I play the most on it is the NES version of Mario Brothers. German Classic Series release, of course. If you're going to get one, get the EZ Flash Omega Definitive Edition, because as cool as this flash cart is, it's not reliable when it comes to save games, and their new version is supposed to fix that. This is fine for me though. You can also play some Game Gear and Master System on here if you want to do that. And Nintendo made the best portable Master System with this gorgeous bright screen, and it's way more comfortable to play than it looks. My hands are kind of small, and for me, this is not cramped. This is nice. That could be in part because I'm comparing it to my new keyring. This is the Anbernic RG Nano, and this is uncomfortable, but it's also awesome. The Game Boy Micro is part metal, part plastic on the shell, but this thing is all metal. And it's a bit heavy for a keyring, if I'm honest. It emulates consoles up to PlayStation 1, but in my opinion, it's best used for Game Boy and Game Boy Color RPGs with its cramped controls and 1:1 screen ratio. It's also decent for playing a bit of NES or Sonic the Hedgehog, anything with simple controls. It'll handle SNES games, but B and A are much easier to press together on this controller than Y and B. GBA games on this screen get a little cramped though. Look at those borders! The screen on this is small, but for games that fill or mostly fill the screen, it's perfectly playable. GBA games are 3x2 widescreen though, and that doesn't look so good on here. If I want to play GBA games, I'm bringing my Game Boy Micro. In fact, let's make this even more of a show and tell and bring this out. This is my Anbernic RG351MP, and it's my go-to. If I'm travelling and I'm not sure what to bring, I'm bringing this. It plays everything I need it to play, and it plays it well on a nice big 4x3 screen, and yet I almost never use it for GBA games. Something about it. The border, the big chunky pixels, the little bit of frame skip. I don't know. GBA games just feel best on original hardware. If this is what you've got and you want to play some Game Boy Advance games, it'll do a perfectly fine job, no doubt about it. But in my opinion, it's better suited to SNES or Mega Drive. There's just something about the Game Boy Micro specifically that makes it such a joy to play. It's the most premium feeling GBA with the brightest and crispest screen. Granted, because it's tiny, but still. The raised D-pad feels smooth and comfortable, just the right amount of click, and it's highly accurate as you'd expect a Nintendo D-pad to be. The face buttons have an easy, satisfying click, as do the shoulder buttons. There's more travel than on the DS Lite, and they're not as heavy to press as the ones on the RG351MP. Despite its small size, the A and B buttons are nice and chunky. The start and select buttons are a bit tricky to hit, but that's fine. Otherwise, this just feels great to play. At least if, like me and Donald J. Trump, you're a member of the Small Hands Club. Mine's the limited edition Famicom edition. Here's the box. It's a very cool box with some Super Mario Bros. Graphics in there, and I got a decent deal on this when I bought it for £170 in 2018, and that really is the problem with it today. If I'm carrying this, it's not in my pocket. It's in its pouch, in my bag, in a separate part of my bag from anything that could scratch or squash it. I take it out to play it, and then I carefully put it away when I'm done. The RG Nano, by comparison, spends most of its time in my pocket with my house keys attached. It cost me €40 and holds no sentimental value whatsoever. The best gaming device is the one you've got with you. I'm not enjoying my home consoles when I'm not at home. The RG Nano is always with me, and at the time of its release, the Game Boy Micro could have been that as well. The gaming device that's always with you. Unfortunately, its value on the secondary market now kind of prices it out of being that these days. And it's just too precious for me to want to throw in my pocket. It wasn't always this way. In 2006, less than a year after its UK release date, Joystick reported that Game Boy Micros were being found in bargain bins at Game for just £39, or $75 if you're so inclined. How does that not push your impulse buy button, James Ransom Wiley? I bet he's regretting that now. I certainly am. I wish I could have picked up a few of these at the time, but that's with the benefit of hindsight. At the time, the DS was breaking all sorts of records and nobody wanted the Game Boy Micro. As of March 2007, its lifetime sales were at 2.4 million. Not bad, except the DS was at 40 million. Even the DS Lite, released half a year after the Game Boy Micro, accounted for nearly 22 million of that. I mean, this sold 10 times as much as this. I'll grant you the DS was a runaway success, but let me give you some more context. In the financial year ending April 2007, the Game Boy Micro sold 590,000 units. In that same period, the GameCube sold 730,000, and the Wii sold 5.8 million. So the Game Boy Micro was less successful than the GameCube, while the Wii, which was backwards compatible with the GameCube, was on store shelves, or about to be. The Game Boy Advance SP was absolutely trouncing it in sales as well, clocking up 3.69 million in the same period. Any way you look at it, the Game Boy Micro was a complete flop. Still, I love it. And I genuinely think Nintendo was onto something with this. You see nowadays with the metal Anbernic devices and Nintendo's own Switch OLED that there is a market for premium portable gaming. And the Game Boy Micro was that, but 20 years ahead of its time. Stick a flash card in it for that backwards compatibility and it's like the ultimate Game Boy. I would actually love to see Nintendo put out a new handheld like this. Not exactly, you know. Make it a little bit bigger, more comfortable for people with normal size hands. Make it a little thinner. And upgrade the specs a little bit, especially the sound hardware. But nothing too powerful though. You don't want to be playing 3D games on something like this. But I would love for Nintendo to make the real, ultimate Game Boy. Designed from the ground up to play simple games cheaply with a long battery life, in a form factor that's stylish and easy to carry. And that was the goal with the first Game Boy. And they kept it up, right until the Game Boy Micro. I think it's about time Nintendo brought it back. I mean, yeah, the Switch is cool, but it's big and it's uncomfortable, it's unwieldy, and it manages to be both overpowered and trying to do too much for what I want in a simple pull out and play anywhere handheld. I want an official Nintendo handheld with official Nintendo games. New games and emulated re-releases, running on a cheap, power-efficient embedded chipset. And it should once again, finally, be called Game Boy. But I told you I would tell you why this is Nintendo's best handheld. Better than the DS, better than the 3DS, even the Switch. Well, this is it. Why is this Nintendo's best handheld? Because it's so freaking cute. Nintendo marketed it as a fashion accessory, and I'm not going to lie, it is. And it's adorable. That might not be your metric for the best handheld console, but it's mine, and I don't have to defend that to any of you. If you want an always-with-you device, the RG Nano is great. If you want a handheld that plays all your retro games and feels good doing it, you want the RG351MP or Miu Mini Plus or any of those. But if cute is what you want, here you go, Game Boy Micro, with a flash card. You'll fall in love with it, and made-up words like specifications and practicality will fade away, to be replaced with the only word that matters in portable gaming. Love.
As Nintendo begins to take on new forms, it's important that we can measure how addictive they truly are.
The new Game Boy Micro. Extremely portable. Extremely stylish.
So best is a matter of opinion, and this is mine. But if you've got €150 to spend and a mind racked by cynicism and a heart made of coal, well then, maybe just get yourself a Nintendo Switch. But if you're capable of love, you will fall in love with the Game Boy Micro. And that's that. Thanks for joining me for this look at my favourite handheld system. Thanks to Ultramuffin for supporting the channel. And if you want to join them, just click on that little join button down there. And to everyone else, thanks again for joining me on the Retro Sofa.